Welcome to Tech Gaming. My name is Tom, and this is episode 5 of my Terraforming Tips and Tricks series, a series of videos where I cover everything you need to know about terraforming. So far, I've established the very basics in the last 4 episodes. I covered grid sizing and measuring for all structures in the game so far. I focused on both bridges and inclines and the various building options and difficulties with those. And lastly, I took an in-depth look into paths, and I shed plenty of insight into how I personally use them, considering good design choice and theory. All these videos in this series are concise and offer various strategies and options to make the crafting of your island a little bit easier to handle and understand, and overall, just a more enjoyable experience. I just want to also explicitly state that I'm teaching you how to use these permits and offer my knowledge on them. The way you use these are entirely up to you. Design differs for everyone. I'm not here to tell you if it looks good or not. That's your choice. If you are happy with how you terraformed, then I am happy too. You should be proud of your creations and what you've designed. I know it takes a lot of time and effort to build an island. And lastly, please remember that my series is for all players of all skill levels, so if you just started terraforming, then this is awesome that you're here. But for all you veterans out there watching my video at the moment, please still stick around anyway, because I may surprise you with a new thing or two. Right, it's finally time to give you a full in-depth rundown on both permits. Welcome to episode 5, where I will tell you everything you need to know about the Waterscaping and Cliff-Construction permits in Animal Crossing New Horizons on the Nintendo Switch. First off, a massive thank you for your support. Shout out to these people here for holding my comment section down and absolutely pushing me to give you better content. The feedback, gratitude, and appreciation you show me goes a very, very long way. I really want to get myself out there on the YouTube platform, and slowly but surely I am getting there, and it's all thanks to you. Just to note, there are so many of you that are watching my videos and get something useful out of it, so please take 2 seconds to just click that subscribe button, as most of you have already come back for more anyway. Also, I put a ton of effort into these videos to help you out. It takes a while to make these, so consider hitting that like button that takes literally 1 second if this video was worth your time. So, with that out of the way, let's start off with the very basics as always and work our way up from there. Now, some of you have mentioned to me to please add a how to unlock the terraforming application, so I've answered. It's available once you have finished the campaign side to the game via these simple steps and requirements here on the screen. Firstly, you're going to need to build the campsite that Tom Nook requests you to build. This is part of the main storyline, so you'll get there eventually if you're not up to it. Next, you're going to need to invite your first villager to live on your island. You can do this by traveling to an RNG island via a Nook Miles ticket, after which you will build the 3 required housing plots for villagers. Again, Tom Nook will walk you through these steps of this questline. And finally, you need to get your island to a 3-star rating. Now, I won't touch on this because my focus here is on waterscaping and cliff construction, but once you have unlocked the terraforming app, you're pretty much good to go. The waterscaping permit goes hand in hand with the cliff construction permit. Both of these permits cost 6,000 Nook Miles each from the Nook Stop ATM and Resident Services. If I'd recommend one to buy first, I would say the waterscaping permit, as it will allow you to fix the river structures and create waterfalls. This will allow you to save money on bridges and fix that one tile that won't let you fit the structure you've been desperately wanting to build. Now, to understand how they work together, we got to break these down individually. The waterscaping permit gives you a blue shovel with the ability to dig up the ground in front of you and create tiles of water, or fill the water tiles with dirt to create solid ground tiles. This is the same for the cliff construction permit. It gives you an orangey brown colored shovel and grants you the ability to build up and remove cliffs. Both permits will follow the grid tile format covered in depth in episode 1. To use either of them, fire up the terraforming application on your Nook phone and select the appropriate permit you want to use. The shovel appears and you're off to work. Using the permit will actively engage with the tile space directly in front of your character's facing position. So this is probably the most important thing to remember. Always ensure you are standing facing the right way so that when you interact with the tile you want to modify, it's the right one. Standing slightly off a tile, the game will allocate you to the tile you are most likely on and will modify the connecting tile you are closest to. Now let's break down each of these permits by looking at all their available functions, then I'll share a few tips in each of them. First up, waterscaping. Function 1, land removal and water creation. Interacting with a solid ground tile in front of you creates a single tile space of water. You cannot create this water tile on the beach, on corners of a cliff, inside the resident services area, and on edges of landmass that connects to the beach. It will not work if there is an item nearby occupying the grid space or if there's a villager present within that grid space. Note that it will still work on top of paths you've created, regardless of any tile type you've placed down. Interacting with a cliff edge will create a waterfall, but more on this later. Function 2. Water removal and land creation. Interacting with a tile of water in front of you creates a single tile of solid ground. Note that you cannot create solid ground to fully close up river mouths. This feature will not work to extend the edges of landmass connecting to the beach, nor will it work if there is a villager present in the tile space, or items nearby. Interacting with a waterfall tile will close that waterfall and create a solid cliff edge. Note that this works on both levels, from the top of the waterfall and from the bottom of the waterfall, so long as you're facing it. Now here's the tricky part to waterscaping, the half a tile space. Now we've already established that on land, interacting with a tile will dig up a tile for water. Interacting again will fill up that water space. However, if you continue to interact with adjacent tiles, your first interaction will now round the edge, creating a half tile space. Only when you interact with this half a tile space do you fully remove the tile entirely. Right, here are my tips for waterscaping. Tip number 1. This tip covers a design value that I practice on my island. First, start by figuring out where your river mouths are located on the edges of your island. A river mouth is simply the river that extends out toward the ocean. Now, I personally like to connect the waterfalls that I create. I make sure that they somehow all diverge into a larger river, and this river has access to the sea, just like in real life. This goes for all waterfalls from level 2 and proceeds all the way down to ground level and then out toward the ocean. Tip number 2. To speed up the removal of ground tiles, aim for solid square-shaped tiles with half a tile edges connecting to them. Removing the solid single tile will result in the other half tiles that are adjacent to it falling off with it. Tip number 3. Reversing tip number 2 works as well. Adding land to a solid body of water will result in filling land on the connecting half a tile spaces of water adjacent to that tile. Tip number 4. I've found that the fastest way to remove and add water, especially for larger areas like rivers, is working in a line then snaking back up. That is because you simply face in a linear direction and interact with each tile from the side. Standing in front of a tile seems slower to me, and I personally spent a bit more time relocating my position for the next tile. This also felt like I made more errors too. Tip number 5. Use outlines to dimension sizes for rivers, streams, ponds, and waterfall catchments. This way, you can get an overview and perspective on what the overall size would look like before committing to removing all of the landmass. Tip number 6. Create single tiles of land in between rivers to substitute the use of a bridge. This is helpful when you're short on money and are sick of swapping to the vaulting pole. Note that this works best at river mouths as they cannot be fully closed up. Tip number 7. If you are creating ponds, I personally believe that squared off creations seem rather jarring, but again, this is totally up to you, as I have both a mix of rounded off and squared off designs on my island, depending on the surrounding environment and landscape. Experiment with all shapes and sizes until you're personally satisfied with a design that suits you. Tip number 8. This has to do with player interactivity. In my testing, the largest ground you can cover in one single jump is 2 tiles long. This is true for all directions, including jumping diagonally. This will help you to plan out how large you want the river or water space to be without it being crossable. Tip number 9. Make sure you use the right analog stick to adjust your camera perspective constantly. This helps in making sure that you get a different viewpoint when working on the grid and helps me with determining size for various builds. Tip number 10. Experiment, test, and create. You will never know what it truly looks like until you try it out for yourself. For much larger builds, I suggest that you test that out on what it looks like on a program, but more on this later in the video. And finally, tip number 11. My final tip is rather a warning. When waterscaping, you need to make sure that you leave enough water to fish normally. If you care about fishing and finishing your Critterpedia and museum, then you'll want at least one river space on a cliff section in order to catch clifftop only fish. And you want any river you hope to fish in to be a standard width, which is 3 to 4 tiles wide. This ensures that the bobber on your fishing rod will travel where you need it to go when the fish spawn. Using both functions of the waterscaping permit, you'll be able to build plenty of cool designs for yourself. but here are some designs that I wanted to share with you that I thought may look cool and interest you. 1, we have a love heart pond. This one's pretty cute and looks awesome on your map. Number 2, we have a lattice hopping area. This is heaps of fun for mini games and obstacle courses that I personally enjoy doing with my friends. Number 3, we have a river crossing. Again, this is a great substitute for a bridge. Number 4, creating waterfall catchments, kind of like a mini pond with a waterfall backdrop. Number 5, we have river forks. Remember, a river doesn't necessarily have to be a single body mass of water in one direction. Feel free to split them up. And lastly, we have item monuments. Consider using tiles of land in the middle of water areas to often show or display some cool ideas for your items. If you're interested in any of these, my next videos on this channel will cover how to make them with a full step-by-step guide, so let me know in the comments which ones you're most interested in seeing a tutorial on. Now, let's cover the cliff construction permit in depth, so that next episode, we'll be able to cover in detail how to create some awesome looking waterfalls. Function 1, cliff construction. Interacting with a tile in front of you builds a single block of cliff that I call a column. Here's one thing to always keep in mind. Cliffs are always built and destroyed from the level below them, so from now on in my videos, I'll refer to the lowest level of floor, which is the floor with your resident services, as ground floor. All preceding levels above this are levels 1, 2, and 3. Cliffs cannot be built on the beach or in resident services. Cliffs will always require solid ground underneath before building a cliff. Cliffs won't be able to be built if there is an item in the grid space or if there is a villager nearby in the surrounding tile area. Note that columns of cliffs can be built directly on top of your paths, regardless of their style. Cliffs cannot be stacked directly on top of each other's grid space. This means that it works very much like a pyramid. The topmost layer's grid space is always a maximum size of one less tile space area than the layer below it. Here's an example to make this easier for you to understand. Because the game requires you as a player to be able to access and interact with all cliff faces via the ladder tool. Note that level 3 is buildable but not accessible via the ladder. I will cover uses of this level later in my design series. Function 2, cliff removal. Interacting with a column in front of you breaks down that column, leaving solid ground in that tile space. Remember, you can only interact with the cliff from the level below. To remove a level 1 cliff, you need to be positioned facing it, standing on the ground level. To interact with a level 2 cliff, you need to stand on level 1, and so on and so forth. Now, much like waterscaping, cliff tiles can also be rounded off to a half a tile shape. The minimum requirements for a rounded corner cliff to work is a 2x2 cliff column. Attempting to round the adjacent side will break off both the solid column and the adjacent rounded one. It is possible to round off both opposite columns, however, like you see here. It is also possible to make your entire island ground level by removing the other levels completely, and vice versa. Just remember, you need to remove the topmost layer first, then work your way down to the ground, and for building upward, it's the complete opposite. I plan on redoing my entire island, making it entirely out of level 3, with sunken ground facilities on the bottommost level, so look forward to that. Hint, I'm going to be streaming very soon. Also, keep in mind you cannot remove columns that have waterfalls active. You will need to close up the waterfall with a waterscaping permit before you remove them. Sweet, now here are my tips for cliff construction. Tip 1. Cliff construction serves 3 main purposes for me as a designer on my island. The first and most primary purpose for this permit is it's the only method to gain verticality on your map. Consider planning out where your levels should go, and this depends on what features you want on your island and what theme you aim to achieve. Again, this is totally subjective. Some want that natural look and do very minimal editing to the original island layout, if any. Others choose to completely modify their island form entirely. My advice here is to look and visit other islands and see what design style clicks with you and go from there. Remember, imitation is the greatest form of flattery. The second purpose is waterfall placement. I personally think waterfalls are one of the most beautiful features in the game. Others believe having waterfalls are overkill. Again, each to their own. But in game, cliff constructions allow you to create them, so consider making the block of land first, then add waterfalls in places based on your pathing, camera perspectives and views, as well as surrounding structures and items. Third and lastly, cliff constructions provide the highest form of fencing. Consider using cliffs in single tile rows to form fencing to separate landmass and features, hidden areas like dig sites or orchards, or even mazes like the one you saw in my island tour video. Tip number 2. Just like waterscaping tiles, the fastest way to remove and add columns is to always target the solid square tile column, as breaking these or adding these will remove and add half tile columns of that cliff that are adjacent to it. Tip number 3. Cliff columns can also act as hopping spaces around landmass. Tip number 4. Cliffs make great entrances to secret locations, as camera perspectives become obscured behind the cliffs and landmass. Use these to your advantage when planning out travel routes to certain areas, much like my secret beach you see here. Tip number 5. Cliffs make great backdrops for structures, on their own or with waterfalls. Consider multiple cascading waterfalls for a more dramatic effect. Tip number 6. Cliffs can be constructed as podiums for objects, like my fountain feature you see here in my town square. Consider using various sized items for various effects. Raising items give off a sense of importance and appeal to the game's natural revolving camera angle and depth of field. Tip number 7. Considering having edibles on you at all time to ensure that when you're renovating, you can eat something and get rid of a tree or a rock and continue terraforming. I personally have a few turnips on me, as eating one represents eating 10, as they are a stack of 10 and will give you a full capacity for removal. And finally, tip number 8. Yes, you've heard this one before, but experiment, design, and create for yourself. You don't know what it actually looks like in real life until you try it on your own. Here are a few interesting ways of cliff construction. Again, if you want to know how to make these, let me know in the comments. First up, we have a secret entrance. You've already seen this clip, but this is the secret entrance that I plan to make for my secret beach behind my nook's cranny. Secondly, a rounded cliff top. This is just to again show you that you can round edges on cliffs. Example number 3 are item podiums. Just like you see my robot heroes in this example, it helps to accentuate the items if you place them on the next level above. The last examples that I want to share with you are my maze and my multi-leveled garden area. These spaces were some of the most fun that I've had in Animal Crossing New Horizons with mates. But again, it takes so much room up on your map, so consider that, and it takes a lot of time to prepare and build. Awesome! I've covered both permits for you to the best way that I can. In my next video, I finally get to the design series. In episode 1 of my design series, I'm going to be covering everything you need to know about the construction of waterfalls, and I hope to share with you various waterfall designs that I think are personally awesome. If you made it this far into the video, I wish you the best of experiences when you terraform your islands. In the description below, I have left a link to a fan-made application that is a 3D island planner. You can run this directly through your internet browser or download either a Windows or Mac version. But be warned, it's currently in early stages of development, so it isn't bug-free, and you may need some proper hardware on your device to run it. Unfortunately, you won't be able to use your phone to run it. Now, without saying too much, this app will allow you to build and test out terraforming spaces before you spend hours in the game. Now, if you're interested in how I use this, let me know in the comments. I'm more than happy to make a quick video on it if I get enough interest. My last bit of advice before I leave you is, just take it slow and remind yourself that there is no such thing as a one design fits all. Continue to experiment and test until you are happy with your creations, because that's all that matters. Good design execution will only come in time and persistence and practice. So thank you so much for watching this episode here on TAC Gaming. Remember, you can help me out by subscribing and liking this video. If there's any other help that you may need for anything in Animal Crossing New Horizons, like most of you already have, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help you. And as always, it's been an absolute pleasure. I will see you in my next video, and until then, I hope you are enjoying your island life.